My name is Aisling Meehan, agri solicitor and based in County Clare. I've been working with Embrace Farm for the last 15 years, helping farm families in the aftermath of a farm accident. I would say some of the most frequently asked questions when somebody passes away suddenly is naturally in a farm situation, who's going to look after the farm? That's not, the first thing that they normally think of, because, if there's cows to be milked or animals to be fed, or that's, and generally friends and neighbours come in and they're very good. But then I suppose you start thinking what's, medium to longer term plans. Naturally, then I suppose people's attention would be drawn towards, God, was there a will? If there was a will, where is it? If there wasn't a will, what are the consequences of not having that will? So they'd be kind of typically the first kind of legal issues that people would think of after a farm accident. Generally, I think farmers need solicitors when it comes to succession planning. Naturally, you need, I suppose, a team of people to help you through that process. So a solicitor would be one part of it. You'd have maybe an accountant and maybe your agricultural consultant. So it would help with the succession process, I suppose, initially in terms of doing up a will. And depending on your stage in life, that will can vary. I mean, if you've young kids, you generally would put in provision for trusts, etc. Also, I suppose, to make sure that land is properly registered. Often I'm finding now that spouses want property put into both their names, and that kind of eases the burden should something happen. Equally, I suppose, when it comes to like farmers, if God forbid, if they lost capacity, through a farm accident, and if they were unconscious or, still legally they have, authority, but they don't have the capacity. So that's really important they have what's called an enduring power of attorney in place. So that will be some of the reasons that people would typically come to me from a farming sector for a bit of advice and guidance and counselling. Generally, I would say prompt enough, for the reason being that some farmers tend to put in wishes around, burial and where they might be buried is part of their will, or even as part of instructions when they're drawing up their will. Now, naturally, I find that most people would also communicate this to their next of kin or, family members. So I would say, if you think that the solicitor might have some details like that, I think it would be better to contact the solicitor sooner rather than later. When it comes to, I suppose, wondering what's in a will or whether there was a will, I find typically in a couple of weeks after death of somebody, when it comes to, reading the will, typically people leave it until after the month's mind, just to give people a chance, I suppose, to grieve and to kind of get their head around what's after happening. When it comes to wills and appointing a solicitor, typically it tends to be the solicitor that drafted the will and took the instructions on the will, and typically it can be like a family solicitor, and even it can transcend generations. Equally, I suppose, you're not obliged to stay with that solicitor. It's up to the executor really, and the executor would normally be appointed under the will, and they can decide who will administer the will. I'm finding more so now that executors tend to price around a little bit, or equally they might want to go to a different solicitor that might have the relevant expertise to deal with whatever their queries are. So really there's a good bit of, I suppose, choice there for the executor to choose who deals with the estate. Unfortunately, if there's no will in place, well then the assets pass under the rules of intestacy. So typically that would be kind of to the next of kin. So if a person is married, all their estate would fall to their spouse. In the event that they're married with kids, 2/3 will go to the spouse, 1/3 will be left equally amongst all the kids. If they're neither married nor have kids, it would be left to typically the parents if they're still alive, or if neither of the parents are still alive, it will be left equally to the brothers and sisters. The process generally will entail that Embrace Farm will reach out to me with names and contact details of the person who they feel might need a bit of support when it comes from a legal perspective. we would normally reach out to them then, and we would try and schedule a call that can either be in person, on the telephone, or via Zoom. And we would generally start with an initial 1 hour consultation. Often I find that people would maybe send in a bit of information beforehand that would come from the client themselves rather than through Embrace. Embrace are very conscious, I suppose, to be, around people's data and protecting their data. So whatever information would come directly from the client. So it generally would help me to plan a little bit better, to be prepared for the consultation if I get that information. Equally, some people don't send on information, and we can take it, play it by ear and take it as it is on the day. And generally, we just kind of talk through the issues. A lot of it, people might have their own solicitor and they just want a second opinion or just want a sounding board as to whether what's happening, is it kind of what's to be expected, or could things be done a little bit differently? So sometimes I think it just gives them reassurance. Equally depends on what stage people are in the process. I mean, you've people that are just really recently bereaved and, situations where there mightn't be a will and they're worried about tax and they're worried about the fact there isn't a will. So it's to be able to just talk people through the process about what's involved. You might have people that already have engaged a solicitor, as I said, might be coming back looking for a bit of, advice or a second opinion. And equally, you might have people that have come out the other side and, they want to get their affairs in order because they might have had an unpleasant experience by affairs not having been in order and they having to deal with a tragic, sudden accident. So they just want to make sure that that doesn't happen to the next generation. So it really does depend. But I suppose, I take each case and I mean, you deal with it with complete empathy. That's the main thing. Because I appreciate that people are going through a lot of other things other than these legal. So I find a lot of the time just being able to talk through it with another solicitor and just get, as I said, like just another person's perspective can often be very reassuring and comforting. Embrace Farm are making a huge impact on farm families. I mean, I meet them all the time. They meet people, I think, at their most vulnerable. They're there with a helping hand. They make the process so easy. I think the really important piece about Embrace Farm is that it connects people that have been through something similar. Unfortunately, I lost my own mother at a young age, and my father always said that no one really understands what it is to lose a partner or a parent unless somebody's actually been through it. And I firmly agree with that. So I think if you can connect other widows or widowers, and indeed, like unfortunately, kids that have lost a parent through a farm accident, I think the support that's there is just invaluable. People are at different stages of their grieving. They're at different stages of, their experience, be it legal, financial, accounting, whatever it is. And I think there's a huge support network there that people can avail of. So like often I come across people even through my own work, that might have been affected by, sudden illness or death on a farm. And I would always encourage them to reach out to Embrace Farm, no matter what, because I just think that emotional support is invaluable. And Embrace Farm are one of the only organisations I'm aware of that provide support to the farming community like they do. So it's really important to be able to give farm families different legal options that would be available to them. Yes, to have a will. I think just to be aware of the consequences of, something wasn't planned happened, that where does that leave people? I think it's really important. It takes an hour at most to put that in place. But I think the impact it can have long term is huge. It's a small amount of time. I know farmers are busy. I know these things can be expensive, but in the long run, there's a succession planning grant available as well, where you claim back 50% of the cost of getting a will done and getting succession planning advice from the Department of Agriculture. So they're encouraging people to go and to do it and to have your affairs in order. So I think it's well worth just, penciling in an hour. And even at this time of the year, if it's a New Year's resolution or it's something that you should do, just put a timeline on it and just say, I'm going to have it done by X period. And then, as I said, the hardest thing is making an initial will, and it's always easier to review it then as circumstances change. I was delighted to contribute to the booklet that was being produced by Embrace Farm to help farm families in the aftermath of a farm accident or a sudden death on the farm.
Embrace Farm has created a number of resources offering a range of practical information that might be needed in the aftermath of a serious injury or sudden death, such as succession planning, legal and financial mentoring. If you or someone you know has been affected by a serious injury or sudden death within a farm family, reach out to us and we will support you in whatever way you need.